Good afternoon, and thanks for tuning in to Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station in the beautiful Santa Clarita Valley, the show where we consider the world through the lens of God's infallible Word. I want to give a quick shout out to the Italian stallion Joe Messina for hosting last week's show. If you haven't noticed, when I'm out of town, I try to have a live show host come on. I don't like that whole best of or a repeat, even though we've done that once or twice. But always appreciate Joe or somebody stepping in for me while I'm out of town. By the way, just in case you didn't know, that is Joe's voice during our show's intro and our show's outro. For those of you who may not have known that, Joe obviously is a multi-talented individual who, of course, not only is on our school board here locally, but of course has his own show. We have a great show for you today. The mayor of Burbank, Konstantine Anthony, who was supposed to be here live and in studio, will, Lord willing, be calling in during the show. In fact, I think he just called in right now, and I'm glad that he has. I'm going to go ahead and put these headphones on. I'm going to say hello to Mayor Konstantine Anthony.
Hello.
Hey, Mayor, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling in today. I was looking forward a couple weeks ago to seeing you live and in studio, but hey, the next best thing is to have you call in.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I did want to apologize, scheduling and all that stuff. I do have a few minutes now, so I wanted to just call in, say hello, and appreciate you for inviting me on the show.
Absolutely. Let me just take a few things here and see how much we can get in. Number one, why do you feel like you obviously you've been the mayor of Burbank for a couple of years now, correct?
I was the mayor in Burbank is a rotating mayor. It's a 1-year term.
Yep.
So I've been on council for about 2.5 years, and I've been mayor since December.
Okay. And why do you feel that Kathryn Barger, one of our supervisors, needs to be replaced, and why do you think you'd be the person to do it?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I actually like Kathryn. I think she does a pretty good job doing outreach in the district. I align with her on like LGBTQ issues and women's right to choose issues and all of that stuff on social issues that are very important. I think the major reason why I'm running this campaign, it's about lived experience. Kathryn has been, she was Michael Antonivich's chief of staff for many years before she took the seat. And the district and pretty much our whole economy, our housing, and most importantly, number one, the homelessness issue has drastically changed in the last few years. Me personally, I've actually been homeless a couple of times in my life, most recently in Burbank. And when I got elected to city council, we took a big leap forward in really changing the way we address homelessness, to the point now where last year, the city of Burbank was actually one of the few cities in the county that actually reduced our homeless numbers. We have a street outreach team. We lead with care first. We have all the services and the mental health, the drug addiction, the getting people on disability or Social Security or Medi-Cal, all of that stuff that people, are clamoring for. We implemented, and it's been really successful. And so I don't think it's a case of Kathryn's not doing her best. I think it's just a skill set. I think I bring a very different background and success record in Burbank that I think is right now in this moment is very much needed at the county level.
Sure. Obviously, you've made some news about some of your policeless moves that you would like to do in the future, especially if you perhaps end up taking Kathryn Barger's position there as supervisor. Explain to the folks out there exactly what Konstantine Anthony's position is on modern day policing, and how do you want to see that changed?
Yeah, I think one of the big divide that has come through in the last few years started, I think, in 2020 with this idea of defund the police, and everyone has a position on it, and they want to yell and shout that, no, you're wrong, and no, you're wrong. I spent a great deal of time working with our local community in Burbank, really explaining what modern policing looks like. In fact, just last night, we had a report from our independent oversight body that uses Burbank as a model for other policing organizations around the country. What we really spearheaded was looking at what is it that a police officer's job is, and what are all the extra stuff that we have added onto that job over the years. Do we want police officers dealing with homelessness? Do we want police officers, in the case of Burbank, dealing with picking up animals for animal shelter and animal control? Do we want uniformed officers with a badge and a gun writing parking tickets? Like, it's little stuff like that that we said, you know what, maybe our Parks and Forestry Department does better with animal shelter and animal control. Maybe we could hire a third-party company to come in that specifically only does parking enforcement, and could they do it at a cheaper and more effective level? All of that stuff, and including the changes we made to the homeless outreach, it really streamlined our police department. And in fact, since I've been on the city council, our response time has sped up. We get officers to 911 calls faster now than we did before I was elected. So it's a strange, I don't know, sort of a gotcha, understanding of, are people using it for political reasons, or is there a real conversation we can have about modern day policing? And honestly, going back in time, looking at how policing was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where it was really a community-based organization rather than a criminal justice, enforcement arm of our, laws and all of that stuff. I think we need to look back and remember where we really had that kind of engagement, and that's what we're doing in our city.
So you're pro cop. You love the cops. That's pretty much clear, right?
You can't. I appreciate the question. I'm pro labor, and so for me, that labor, it needs to be a responsible benefit to the community. I got really targeted when I was running in my last race for city council because I was talking about building solar and wind and closing down fossil fuel plants. And people ask me, hey, why do you want people who work in the fossil fuel industry to lose their jobs? And I said, look, you can't just be pro one type of job, pro, fossil fuel or pro cop or any of this stuff. You have to look at the workforce, the government workforce, the employment workforce as a whole. If there's a way we can put people to work for the benefit of society and sort of carve out their job requirements so that they're most effective in what they do, and then bring in other people who are more effective at a better job, a social worker that takes jobs that takes labor away from police so they don't have to do that social work. If we have a solar and wind technician that can cut out some of the work from a fossil fuel industry worker, right? And then at the same time, can we retrain those people to work on those other jobs? Like, there's a huge movement right now across the country of former police officers who are now doing social work because they saw both sides of it. So, it's not just pro one type of job. It's looking at labor as a whole.
Sure. A couple weeks ago, obviously, the news. Deputy Klinkenberger was shot in front of the Palmdale Sheriff's Station, and obviously the DA came out and said that they're not going to pursue the death penalty, which of course is the DA's prerogative. What do you think?
That's from the governor. Gavin Newsom, he made that clear. So it's it's a double-edged sword. If when the governor says he's not going to do it, then there's no point in the district attorney going for it.
What would Konstantine Anthony think would be a sufficient punishment for a guy that just shoots a cop in the back of the head?
Well, unfortunately, we have some people in this society still that think the death penalty is some sort of deterrent and some sort of punishment. I was, raised in the church, and I believe that there's only, one way to have a human being die that is gracious, and that is through natural causes. Many people say that only God can choose who lives and who dies. I don't think that we in a modern society can execute people by the state. That is it's a very difficult line to cross for me. I think more importantly, I, as a local official, would look at what are the changes we can make on the ground to prevent this from happening. The number one issue that I see that happened with this unfortunate circumstance was the cutting back and allowing single deputies to cover areas without a partner. Mm-hmm. We have a system right now where there's just too much area to handle and not enough support. There's a way that we can maintain a better response to crime without having to over-police everything, but at the same time, not force our officers to be alone in their patrol cars trying to cover too much ground. There's technology we can use, cameras, reports, data, even outreach teams, where we're communicating with the local community, neighborhood watch programs, and community-developed institutions where we get better eyes and ears on the ground so that we're not asking our, police, again, to do more work than they should be doing. It's actually more dangerous for an officer to be out there alone trying to cover all this area, preventing whatever crime they think could possibly be prevented, rather than doing it the old-fashioned way of you always have a buddy, you always have backup, right? And so I think those kinds of conversations is where I would lead on this charge, rather than talking about, well, what is the correct punishment, how much, who, and what, and why. That all comes later, and it's punitive. It takes away from really, what happened.
Yeah. If you're just joining us today on Politics in the Pulpit, we're talking to the mayor of Burbank, Konstantine Anthony, who's running to replace Kathryn Barger as one of our supervisors. Because our time is limited, Mayor, and again, I appreciate you calling in today, and I know you're busy. I want to just quickly, if I could, during this last little 5 or 6 minutes we have here during this half hour, maybe just to address the elephant in the room that obviously kind of propelled you into fame, if you will. Obviously, this happened up here in my area. I don't know if you remember, Mr. Mayor, but we actually met each other in a parking lot at a Rally for Life, and I was my side was doing Rally for Life. You guys are doing a Rally for Reproductive Rights, and we met briefly in the parking lot. And you were very gracious and were handing out some information to me and some folks that were with us. And by the way, again, very gracious. It's important for people to know that was an amicable exchange between us. But obviously,
I think that was a really great event. Actually, people were talking about what they believed in, and they weren't attacking each other. I think it was nice.
Exactly. In fact, the way I put it to the newspaper here was, "This is an example of America. We got one side that believes one thing, one side that believes the other, and we're leaving each other alone." So that's always a good thing. But obviously, up here in Santa Clarita, you attended an event called Drag Queen Bingo. And obviously the thing that kind of propelled you in the national news and where Jesse Waters and all these guys started talking about you is you received a paddle to the bottom by a drag queen. Tell me a little bit about that event and what was that about?
Well, I don't want to talk about that too much. It was, I think it got overblown. I think a lot of people were simply shocked that it even happened. But I don't know. I spent a lot of time down in LA proper, and there's drag queen bingo every weekend, in West Hollywood and Hamburger Mary's. And so it's a common thing. And so I didn't think anything of it. But the rest of the country is, they have different beliefs, and I can appreciate that. It's, it was never meant to be a big public spectacle. So it's an odd situation, because when one person shares it, suddenly it becomes something to talk about. And then everyone asks me, why would you share that? I'm like, I'm not sharing it. That's not what I do. I like to, like you said, go to events, talk to people, look them in the eye, shake hands, and come to either an agreement or agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But all of these things, I think, are leading to a sensationalist national conversation where, we're picking a side. We see a quick video or a clip or a phrase, and we make a snap judgment, and there's no nuance.
Well, with all due respect, Mayor, let me just say this, with all due respect. You'd mentioned it's sensationalistic, and true, it can be that way. But wouldn't you agree that, receiving a paddle by a drag queen could be itself displayed as sensational?
I mean, I don't think so, but I know people do. So, yeah.
Okay.
But again, that's a belief system. And like I said, when I attended that, the rally that I met you at, I was there not to push any ideology or argue my point. I actually was there with policy. I wanted to offer a solution to a lot of the issues that we're seeing. There's, a huge complaint from both sides of the aisle on this about what is healthcare and what is women's rights on these, clinics and all this stuff. And one of the things that I've been proposing at the county level, how we have letter grades for our restaurants, it says A, B, C, or D, someone comes out, does a grade and puts it on the front door. I want to offer a signage so that healthcare clinics can state what's going on, on site there. If it's a clinic that performs different services, it lists the services, and then that way there's no confusion. Nobody gets upset. Nobody starts saying, hey, you're trying to deceive everybody, or hey, you're not being honest and forthright. So that's the kind of solutions that I bring to the table, where it's a consensus, where it's both sides can agree, as opposed to trying to push, well, I believe this and your beliefs are wrong. And it's just not who I am.
Well, I'll definitely say this. We'll have to agree on certain things and disagree on other things, but I do very much appreciate you calling in today, sir. I know you got a busy schedule, and I do hope that our discussion was amicable enough for you to maybe even come into studio one of these days or call in again.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the race isn't for a while, but one of the things I tell everybody is I'm doing the outreach early so that if I do, by the grace of God, get the seat, I don't show up in your neighborhood or on your show later and having been the first time you've met me. I want to be able to say that I've done the outreach, and I want to continue to do the outreach. So I do appreciate you bringing me on. This has been great.
Absolutely. This is Mayor Burbank Konstantine. Anthony, this is Politics in the Pulpit here on your hometown station. We'll be back in just a minute. All right, we're back live here on Politics in the Pulpit. This is your holy host, Pastor Jerry Cook, on your hometown station. We were blessed, actually, to have the mayor call in earlier. I didn't think he would. But I'm glad he did, and our conversation was amicable. There was a lot more I could have asked. Obviously, our time was very constrained, but thankfully, during the break, we talked, and we were able to at least get another opportunity to where he will call in or come and visit the station here and talk to me live and in studio. So one of the things that most people want me to do is just chew a guy up and spit him out, which is a lot of fun, I guess. But at the same time, I also want to start relationships and have conversations. So hopefully he will come on again. One of the things I wanted to just briefly touch on was Konstantine Anthony's statement or press release that he put out after the whole drag queen bingo debacle happened back in September. Actually, it was September 14th, so just a couple weeks ago. He said this, quote, "In my capacity as a community leader, I refuse to engage with the baseless outrage that has followed drag queen bingo." And then he goes on to say that this particular outreach or fundraiser is a widely loved event embraced by diverse Santa Clarita community groups, including veteran family associations and religious organizations. I would probably want to ask him which religious organizations actually did embrace drag queen bingo, because I can't remember in 22 years of Freedom's Way Baptist Church whether or not we've had a drag queen bingo, and I don't know of any other conservative evangelical church here in Santa Clarita that might engage in this type of fundraising either. But maybe next time he comes on, I'll be able to ask him which religious organizations, because I'd love to talk to those leaders, elders, pastors, or whomever is leading those organizations as to why they would do that. Also, I also failed to ask, because of time constraints, just why he would brag and say that in some of the things that he did here during his city council days, mandating the COVID-19 vaccine requirements for Burbank city employees, which of course takes away free will and takes away the liberty of the individual to make that choice. Obviously, news broke today that Los Angeles school district is not going to enforce vaccine mandates requirements for their teachers anymore. I don't exactly know what that's going to do for all the teachers who were fired prior to this mandate being implemented, but I guess let the lawsuits continue. I'm sure that is going to happen. The other thing that he brags about here in some of the things that he says is proven leadership is ban the sales of Mylar balloons in Burbank. Wow. I didn't know that was a major thing. I thought that was something that was banned a long time ago. I remember hearing John and Ken back in the 2010s talking about how people were going on and on about Mylar balloons and how they were, causing electrical outages and what have you. But hey, I was just in a Dollar Tree not too long ago and I saw a whole bunch of Mylar balloons in there. So it's amazing how that ends up being a big deal. But anyway, Lord willing, we'll have Konstantine back on in the future. Tonight is the second Republican debate at the esteemed Reagan Library here in the beautiful Simi Valley. It should prove to be an exciting evening on many levels because the Biden team has tapped Governor Hairgel, a.k.a. Governor Newsom, to rebut the Republican candidates after the debate. Now, what's interesting about this and what's made all the news is not so much that Governor Hairgel is the one rebutting the Republican candidates, but it's not that Kamala Harris is the one doing this. Now, can you imagine Kamala Harris's team at this moment? What do they feel like? Being slighted in a major way by the President of the United States to not be the one coming out here, considering California is Kamala's home state. She represented here for many years in many capacities, and yet she is not the one rebutting the Republican candidates tonight. So I don't know what Team Harris is feeling like, but definitely Biden snubbed the VP for probably the most successful governor in the nation, at least in his own fertile imagination. So keep your eyes peeled, as I'll be doing a write-up for KHTS here real soon on tonight's debate, and Lord willing, it'll prove to be a fun debate. Now, I wanted to just quickly and briefly talk about an issue that's about 2 weeks old now, but I haven't been able to fit it into the station and talk about it. Now, many of you have heard that Senator Chuck Schumer relaxed the Senate dress code for Uncle Fester in Pennsylvania a week and a half ago. Now Fetterman can come to work in his hoodies and jogging shorts. Now, what's interesting is the Senate used to have dress standards, and obviously those dress standards have been relaxed. Even here at the station where I do my show, we have dress standards here as well, including for those that are not behind the mic. In fact, just the other day, John Fetterman presided over the Senate in a sloppy-looking navy blue button-up shirt that if you catch it on YouTube, you'll say to yourself, wow, that thing looks about 8 sizes too big for the guy. But the fact is, he was presiding over the Senate. Now, let me ask you a question about this rule change. Now, I want you to listen closely. How many of you think this rule change diminishes not only his role as senator, but shows disrespect for both the office in which he holds, but also the hallowed halls of the Senate chamber itself? I mean, how many of you think that? I mean, if you're shouting, saying, yeah, I believe that this rule of letting dress standards kind of be diminished, not only diminishes the role as senator, but shows disrespect for both the office and the hallowed halls. Now, if you think that, let me ask you a question. So then why do so many of you attend a church where your minister dresses just like Fetterman? Are you listening? Why would you tolerate a low dress standard for God's man who stands behind God's pulpit, but be outraged at what the Senate did to appease Fetterman? Just a question. I want you to muse about it. I want you to ruminate. I don't want you to react. I just want you to think about this. Why are you upset with the rule change in the Senate, but you're equally not as upset with how the minister presents himself? The late, great Andrew Breitbart said this: politics is downstream from culture. That is, culture affects our politics, as if you haven't noticed in the last few years. But how about this statement, if I might just kind of switch around Breitbart's statement? How about this? Culture is downstream from the church. Culture is downstream from the church. Here's the way I would put it. As the church goes, so goes the culture. For the last 60 years, specifically in the last 30 years, the standard of dress for the modern minister is really no better than John Fetterman's in the Senate. Some of you might remember when guys like Bill Hybel with Willow Creek Church in the Midwest, and then, of course, more popular here in California at Saddleback Church, the whole seeker-sensitive church movement, where that whole movement was attempting to make the church a little more palatable and a little more appreciable for the culture. Now, I want you to think about this. The pastor should be dressing for Christ, not the culture. I mean, if we think the Senate is hallowed, then how about the church house? I mean, we think the office of senator comes with a level of respectability, specifically as that respectability relates to dress. I mean, we've all grown up with this visual in our mind of the president dressing up, the vice president dressing up, senators and congressmen and representatives all dressed to the hilt, looking their best, representing their constituents in their respective office. So if we think the office of senator comes with a level of respectability, specifically as it relates to dress, so then how about the office of pastor? And I'm being dead serious, folks. As the church goes, so goes the culture. Now think about it. Why would you demand more out of your senator, who may or may not be a believer? Why would you demand more out of your senator? Maybe that was a Freudian slip there. That was intentional. Why would you demand more out of your senator than you would out of the man of God who preaches and teaches the Word of God, which frankly is far more consequential as far as eternity is concerned? How can you sit there, for those of you who do, how can you sit there each Sunday and listen to a man in a pair of ripped skinny jeans, a fitted shirt, because obviously he's working out, and some kind of culturally relevant jacket, if he's wearing a jacket at all. And he's up there trying to somehow be hip and trying to be, consistent and right with the culture, not looking different, not looking peculiar, just looking like everybody else? Or is what I'm saying offending you because you happen to like your preacher? I'm not dismissing the fact that you should not like your preacher. What I'm saying is why the anger at the Senate change in concerning dress, and yet you consider those halls of the Senate to be hallowed, but yet the church house is somehow what? Less than? Why is it you want a straight-talking politician, but you settle for a seeker-sensitive preacher? I just think about that. If you want to think about it. You want a straight-talking politician who gives it to you right down over home plate. But yet, when it comes to church, you'll settle for a seeker-sensitive preacher every time that, unfortunately, isn't the same as that straight-talking politician. Your Christianity should be driving your conservatism. Your conservatism should not be driving your Christianity. Let me say that again. Your Christianity should be driving your conservatism. Your conservatism should not be driving your Christianity. You better make sure Christianity is in the driver's seat and not a political ideology that should stem logically from the principles of biblical Christianity. My advice to you, if you would like to take my advice today, is to find a pastor who dresses for the esteemed office in which he holds. And I mean that with all seriousness. Stop pretending to be revolted by the dress of Fetterman. After all, culture is downstream from church. And as the church goes, so goes the rest of society. And I want you to think about that. If you ever have the habit of looking at YouTube, which I like YouTube, I've been noticing a lot of uploads from some guy that's been putting, cleaned up photos and cleaned up videos of what life was like in LA or New York in the 1910s, 20s, 30s, all the way into the 50s. And by the way, these videos are pretty impressive. They look good. They look cleaned up. Evidently, they've done a pretty good job of doing that. And some of them look almost brand new, frankly. But I don't know what kind of digitizing they're doing, but they look really good. But if you just look at those YouTube videos of life in the 1910s, life in the 1920s, all the way through about, I'd say, the middle 1960s, you're going to notice a major consistent theme, which is everybody is dressed up. Everybody. Now, I'm going to be the first one to tell you, I'm not dressed up all the time. I mean, when I get home, I'm putting on a pair of shorts and a t-shirt and a pair of flip-flops. But again, I'm at home. I don't want to look like, the people of Walmart everywhere I go, But I have no problem looking like that at home because I'm at home. But I definitely don't want to look like that in the Senate if I was an elected official, and I definitely wouldn't want to look like that behind the pulpit of the Freedom's Way Baptist Church or any church pulpit that I happen to stand behind. Why? Because I respect the office in which I hold. And I would hope that those elected, whether in the House or in the Senate, or would be at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, that they also would respect the office in which they hold, because they're not holding that office for themselves, and they're not representing themselves. They're representing the people, the constituents that voted them in. And the same thing for the pastor. The pastor is not standing behind the pulpit representing himself or representing a handful of elders or deacons. He is representing the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He is the ambassador of the King, and I think he should look like it. When we turn here on Politics in the Pulpit, I want to play a little clip here. I want to give the mayor of Burbank a little bit of pushback, even though he's not on the program right now. But I wanted you to hear in his own words from a clip about policing that I think we'll hit him on again the next time he decides to come on the show when we come back here on Politics in the Pulpit, here on your hometown station. All right, we're back here for our last few moments here on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station. I wanted to pick back up on a clip that was sent to me a little bit earlier. I didn't play it earlier because I didn't realize we would have the mayor call so soon during the first hour. But I asked him a question about policing. And he obfuscated ever so slightly in his answer and actually kind of did a little bit more. I think he kind of talked around the issue as opposed to actually dealing with it headlong. I think this video clip of him in his own words, which, by the way, you can find on YouTube if you'd like to find it. Let's play that clip if you would, Andrew.
Complete transformative change in our society to move to a policeless state, meaning the fundamental understanding of how we convict, catch, chase crime and criminology and treat people in jails and prisons and all of that is flawed. Most other countries do what's called restorative justice. Most other countries have a prison population, a percentage of what we have. We're talking like 5 or 10% what the United States has. These are developed countries, places that are wealthy, that have, industrialized workers and know what they're doing, and full-fledged democracies and all of that stuff. They have moved past a carceral state. We are still living in sort of a quasi, 20th century ideology of you do something bad, you got to get punished. That works when you're 5, right? But when we're talking about human beings on a massive scale, we have to get people back into society. We have to get people to understand that they are.
So I guess that means if you go 100 miles an hour on a freeway that's only marked 65, I guess you don't get penalized for that. Now, that works in my world because I don't do 65 very often when it says 65. Yes, the pastor just confessed a major sin to you. But yes, I mean, what is he saying? That the consequence of your bad decision only works when you're a adolescent or a youth? I asked the question of the mayor, what would be the proper punishment for that criminal that gunned down Deputy Ryan a couple of weeks ago in Palmdale? And again, he obfuscated and just basically said, hey, listen, this is not about what's the right punishment or the wrong punishment. It's about, and then he mentioned a bunch of other things. Again, folks, there has to be repercussions to your decisions. There are repercussions to your decisions in everyday life. Some people get married and then they divorce. Bad decision. Some people probably shouldn't get married. Bad decision. I don't care whether you're 5 years old or 50 years old. There are repercussions for your bad decisions. And I think this pie-in-the-sky notion that is only held by a very small minority, but yet a very vocal minority, is out saying things like, we're going to live in a non-carcerated society. Folks, there are some people that just cannot live in a civil society because by definition, they are uncivil. What do you say to that guy that shot Deputy Ryan in the head? Do you think that's civil? Obviously, it's not civil behavior to be putting a cap on somebody's head every time you walk by somebody. There'll be a lot of parents really upset with that. And also, the mayor said, implied at least, that he had some sort of a church background. And again, I didn't press him on which church because obviously that would provide context. But he'd mentioned something like, the death penalty is something that his faith, I guess, taught is something that should not be done. I would just simply I would have brought up Genesis chapter 9 and brought up verse number 6, where it says, "Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man." So here we've got one of the first commandments of Noah coming off of the ark is the institution of the death penalty for somebody who takes another man's life. And the other confusion that I think a lot of these guys have, especially with those who have a nominal religious background, is they go to Exodus chapter 20 and they see the commandment there. It says, "Thou shalt not kill," and they misunderstand the word "kill" there, thinking that that means any type of kill for any reason. The Lord Jesus Christ actually comments on that exact verse in the Gospels and says, "Thou shalt do no murder." Now, there's a difference between kill and murder. Now, I understand what Exodus chapter 20, verse 13 says, but at the same time, I also know what murder is, and that's premeditated onslaught and killing of an innocent individual. And that is exactly what happened to the deputy and hundreds of thousands of people throughout our own country and around the world every year. And that is an unfortunate reality of the civil society that we live in. And in order to keep it civil, we must elect magistrates that are themselves civil. Lord willing, we'll have an opportunity in the next couple weeks, or maybe as we get closer to the election, to have the mayor here. Again, I think my conversation with him was respectful. I think his conversation back was respectful. And here's the other thing, real quickly, before we get off the air. It's important for us to have these discussions without having to yell back and forth, because if we're advocating for civility, then we ourselves must be civil. Catch the debate tonight, Simi Valley. I'll be covering for KHTS. It should be a lot of fun. Hopefully I'll get a good picture with Governor Hairgel. I'm looking forward to seeing him face to face. This is your holy host, the pastor of Freedom's Way Baptist Church, over and out on Politics in the Pulpit on your hometown station. We'll catch you next week.